Module 2, New Empires in the Americas. Lesson 1. The Europeans set sail. If you were there, you are a sailor living in Portugal in the mid-1400s. Several of your friends are excited about joining an expedition to sail to new unexplored lands. Although Portuguese navigators have made improvements to sailing ships and advancements in ocean travel, you have heard about the dangers other sailors have faced on the open seas. Viking sailors reach North America. The Vikings were the first Europeans to make contact with North America. They came from Scandinavia, a peninsula that includes the present-day countries of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. The Vikings were skilled sailors who developed a new style of ship called the longship, which curved up at both ends. Viking vessels traveled the rough North Atlantic seas better than earlier ships because their designs were more stable. The Vikings raided countries throughout Europe, but they also developed large trading networks. Viking ships sailed to the British Isles and the Mediterranean and Black Seas. Eventually, the Vikings sailed west into the North Atlantic. There they founded a settlement on the island of Iceland in about 874. More than 100 years later, Viking Eric the Red, who had been convicted of crimes in Iceland, was sent away as punishment. He went to Greenland and brought settlers there. Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, was also an adventurer. In the year 1000, he was sailing west from Norway to Greenland when strong winds blew his ship off course and carried it all the way to the North American coast. Erikson and his crew landed on the Labrador Peninsula in present-day Canada. The Vikings then sailed farther south to the island of Newfoundland and perhaps to what is now New England. According to their myths, Vikings saw forests, meadows, and rivers that held larger salmon than they had ever seen. Erikson settled in a coastal area he called Vinland. The Vikings left after only a few years. Attacks by Native Americans posed a constant threat, and the area may have been too far from other Viking settlements to be supported. After the Vikings left North America, Europeans did not return to the continent for centuries. In the 1400s, however, a growing interest in discovery and exploration spread across Europe. Looking toward the sea. Exploration was necessary for European trade. One reason was that European mines were running out of silver and gold. Merchants needed more of the precious metals to conduct business. In addition, new forms of production, such as spinning wheels and windmills, made manufacturing more efficient. As a result, workers needed more raw materials, and merchants needed new markets where they could sell the manufactured goods. Traders also sought products from incense to silk that could only be found in the East. Since the 1200s, Europeans had been traveling east by land. The Crusades had introduced them to knowledge, products, markets, and natural resources found across Asia. For a time, land routes to the east were relatively safe. The Mongols, who had conquered much of the continent, provided protection. When the Muslim Ottomans conquered Constantinople in 1453, however, they blocked the land trade routes to Asia. In response, the European powers began to compete in a race to find a sea route to Asia. Riches and religion. During the 1400s, Europeans had several reasons to explore the world. First, they wanted Asian spices. They hoped to bypass the merchants who had a monopoly on or economic control of the Asian products that reached the Mediterranean. If a sea route to Asia could be found, countries could buy spices and other items directly. Second, religion played a role in exploration. Christians in Europe wanted to convert more people to their faith. Third, many Europeans had become interested in Asian cultures. Explorer Marco Polo wrote a book about his travels throughout Asia. It remained popular in Europe long after his death in 1324. Many Europeans wanted to learn more about Asia and the money they could make by trading with Asians. Portugal leads the way. Portugal became a leader in world exploration. Prince Henry the Navigator, in particular, was responsible for advances that would make exploration more successful. Although he never set out on a voyage himself, Henry greatly advanced Portugal's exploration efforts. In the early 1400s, Prince Henry built an observatory and founded a school of navigation to teach better methods of sailing. He also financed research by map makers and shipbuilders. Finally, he paid for expeditions to explore the west coast of Africa. Scientific and technological advances. Scientific and geographical knowledge about the earth had increased, thanks in part to rediscovery of Roman sources and to overland journeys by European merchants. This knowledge led to better maps. Sailors had more, although still incomplete, information about the sea and lands beyond it. New technology also played a major role in advancing world explorations. Sailors began to use tools such as the magnetic compass, which indicated all directions by always pointing north. In addition, sailors had the astrolabe, a device that enabled navigators to learn their ship's location by charting the position of the stars. Better instruments made it possible for sailors to travel the open seas without landmarks to guide them. The Portuguese also made advances in shipbuilding. They began designing ships that were smaller, lighter, and easier to steer than the heavy galleons they had used before. These new ships, called caravels, used triangular sails that, unlike traditional square sails, allowed ships to sail against the wind. By placing rudders at the back of the ship, the Portuguese also improved the steering of ships. A sea route to Asia. By the 1400s, Portugal had several motives, financial support, and the technology necessary for exploration. Portuguese explorers set out to find new lands, rounding Africa. Even with new technology, travel on the open seas was dangerous and difficult. One person described the effect on sailors of a voyage south from Portugal. Those which survived could hardly be recognized as human. They had lost flesh and hair. The nails had gone from hands and feet. They spoke of heat so incredible that it was a marvel that ships and crews were not burnt. In spite of the dangers, Portuguese explorers continued sailing south, setting up trading posts along the way. In 1488, Portuguese navigator Bartolomeu Dias led an expedition from Portugal southward along the African coast. A storm blew his ship around the southern tip of Africa. This point became known as the Cape of Good Hope. Diaz wanted to continue his voyage, but his men did not. Since supplies were very low, Diaz decided to call off the voyage and return to Portugal. Later, King Manuel of Portugal sent another explorer, Vasco da Gama, on an expedition around the Cape of Good Hope. Da Gama left Lisbon, Portugal in July 1497 and arrived in southwestern India the next year. Portugal had won the European race for a sea route to Asia. When da Gama reached the Indian port of Calicut, Muslim traders met him and his men. The Muslims surprised the sailors by speaking to them in Portuguese. Soon, da Gama and his crew learned that the people of India had been trading with Muslim and Italian merchants who knew Portuguese. Da Gama made 2 more trips back to India. He even governed a small colony there. Results of exploration. Portugal's explorations would have major results, including the start of the Atlantic slave trade. As Portuguese sailors explored the west coast of Africa, they negotiated for gold, ivory, and slaves. The slave trade devastated African communities. It led to increased warfare among kingdoms and broke up many families. The Portuguese sent many enslaved Africans to Europe and to islands in the Atlantic, where they lived and worked under brutal conditions. The other nations of Europe watched as new trade routes brought increased wealth and power to Portugal. They soon launched voyages of exploration to find their own water routes to Asia. Summary and preview. In the 1400s, the Portuguese started a new era of exploration. In the next lesson, you will learn how Europeans reached the American continents.